A psychological exhumation changed the outcome of the investigation 4 years later. A psychological profile is called a detailed examination and analysis of a person's personality, their character traits, behavioral peculiarities, emotional state, intellect, self-esteem, and the motivations behind their actions. To compile such a profile, experts typically resort to methods such as interviews, various psychological tests, observations, situational modeling, and even analysis of social media pages. But what if the person has long passed away, and you need to create their psychological profile and assess their emotional state shortly before death? The case of Kristen Trickle is quite complex and unique in its kind. It is referred to as the first instance of psychological exhumation in forensic history, conducted to uncover the motivations and thought processes of a young woman who suddenly decided to end her life. No one believed that the joyful, devout Kristen, who had big plans for the future, would suddenly end everything without any apparent reason. The forensic pathologist's conclusions supported the main theory, but an experienced psychologist managed to uncover the truth. The main problem was the time that had passed since the tragedy. Years had gone by, but eventually, this did not prevent the conviction of the criminal who was sure he had gotten away with it. Kristen Trickle, née Trickle, was born on August 14, 1993, in a small town in southeastern Nebraska. Her childhood can hardly be described as carefree and untroubled. Her biological mother left the family when the little girl was not even 3 years old. The woman abandoned her husband and child for another man, moved to California, and never again showed interest in her daughter's fate. Kristen's father, James, raised his daughter on his own, doing everything possible to ensure she lacked for nothing. However, the man suffered from a severe illness that progressively worsened, and when Kristen turned 16, her father passed away. Since there were no other close relatives, she could have been sent to a shelter until she came of age. At this time, an aunt and uncle on her father's side, who lived in the neighboring state of Kansas, stepped in. Although the couple was raising 3 children of their own, they expressed a willingness to take in their orphan niece and do everything possible to ensure her a comfortable and happy life. Soon, the young girl moved into her relative's home. In her new family, Kristen never felt like an outsider. On the contrary, her aunt and uncle treated her just as they did their own children, surrounding her with love and care. Kristen herself did well in school, attended art studio classes, helped her family with household tasks, and dreamed of becoming a veterinary doctor because she loved animals dearly. Relatives and friends described her as responsive, kind, friendly, and very sweet. She never despaired, confidently pursued her goals, and energized everyone around her with her optimism. The Rice family was religious, so they regularly attended church on Sundays, where 18-year-old Kristen met a young man named Colby. He was an aspiring musician performing as part of a band that played music during sermons and services. He had also recently turned 18, was quite talented, and dreamed of building a successful music career in the future. The young people quickly formed a friendship, which soon turned into a romantic relationship. Colby was skilled on the guitar and wrote his own songs, which he dedicated to his beloved, capturing her heart. He was open, sociable, cheerful, easily made friends, and could easily be the life of any party. After finishing high school, the young man took a serious interest in military affairs and joined the Army. By the age of 18, he had signed several contracts and commenced his service in the U.S. Armed Forces. Over the next 3 years, he managed to build a decent military career. Meanwhile, he stayed in touch with Kristen, with whom he frequently called and corresponded. At the age of 21, Colby unexpectedly entered the reserves, returned home, and proposed to his sweetheart, who happily accepted. The couple married in April 2014. The newlyweds settled in a small town called Hazen, Kansas, where Colby finished college and pursued a music career, albeit not very successfully. He performed at small parties and local events, playing cover versions of well-known hits. The couple had 2 dogs, which they adored, and many considered their marriage quite happy. However, 5 years into their marriage, a terrible tragedy occurred. On a grim Halloween Eve on October 31st, 2019, around 4 in the morning, a distressed call was made to the emergency services dispatch. The caller, a man who identified himself as Colby Trickle, reported his wife Kristen had fired a bullet into her head from a revolver kept in their home. A medical team was promptly dispatched to the scene along with a police patrol car that was nearby at the time. At the front door, they were met by a young man who allowed the officers inside but stayed outside himself. Trickle appeared relatively calm given the severity of the situation. When the officers entered the bedroom, they found a woman lying on the bed in a pool of her own blood. A large revolver lay on her abdomen, and a gunshot wound was evident on her chin. It seemed she had already passed away, but unexpectedly the victim moved her hand, and an officer found a weak pulse and breathing. Following this, Kristen was moved to the adjacent room to properly position her on the floor for resuscitation efforts. Unfortunately, despite all efforts, she had passed away by the time the ambulance arrived, and the medical team could only confirm her death. Sergeant Brandon Hauptman went outside and informed Colby that his spouse had passed away. The young man asked repeatedly if the officer was sure about this, and upon receiving confirmation, he began to cry. His behavior and tears seemed insincere, as just minutes before Hauptman's arrival, he had been casually talking with other patrollers about video games. At first glance, it appeared that the woman had indeed decided to end her life voluntarily, but upon examining the scene, experienced detectives immediately suspected foul play. It was Halloween Eve, and it seemed the deceased had been actively preparing for the celebration. On her bedroom's vanity lay handmade costume decorations she had prepared, and in the kitchen, themed treats for children were set out in bowls, including lollipop bats, ghost gummy worms, and more. The chosen method of ending her life was very strange and untypical for a woman, as was the scene itself. First, the deceased was found nearly undressed, wearing only her underwear. Women generally want to look beautiful even in death, concerned about how they will be found. Secondly, a gunshot to the head is not a typically feminine method due to concerns about disfiguring themselves. Kristen's face was so badly damaged that she had to be buried in a closed casket. The third and most significant oddity was the weapon itself. The revolver was too large and cumbersome for such a petite and fragile woman. It would have been uncomfortable for her to hold, and she could hardly have twisted her arm to shoot herself in the chin. Moreover, the position of the weapon puzzled the officer, as it lay on the woman's stomach pointing sideways. However, the deceased spouse explained that after realizing what had happened, he too had thought about ending his life, held the revolver to his temple, but then abandoned the thought and decided to call emergency services in hopes of saving his beloved. While law enforcement continued their work at the scene, the woman's mobile phone, lying on a nightstand, unexpectedly rang with an alarm. It turned out the deceased had plans for the morning and had set the alarm not to be late, but she seemingly changed her mind during the night and decided to end her life. This looked highly suspicious, and detectives suspected foul play. They were dealing with a masterful staging. The widower, now the main suspect, was due for questioning. Colby willingly agreed to go to the police station to give his statement. He appeared upset but not devastated, behaving calmly and confidently. He explained that on that evening, his wife Kristen returned from her job at Walmart, where she was a manager expecting a promotion to senior manager. They had played video games together, and then Colby went to bed early because he was feeling unwell while Kristen went to the kitchen to finish cleaning and setting out sweets for the holiday. In the middle of the night, Colby was awakened by a sudden loud bang. For a few seconds, he was disoriented, his ears ringing, and he could see nothing in the darkness. Once he turned on the light, he found his wife lying motionless beside him, blood pouring from her head. He tried to revive her, but realizing it was futile, he grabbed the revolver, held it to his own head, but then set it back on her body, called emergency services, and went outside to meet the police. The sequence and nature of his actions raised many questions. For instance, why he placed the weapon on the woman's abdomen instead of throwing it on the floor, the bed, or leaving it on a nightstand. It was also unclear why he waited outside for the police and medics if he thought his wife might still be saved. Typically, in such situations, people attempt to perform life-saving measures or simply press something against the wound to stop the bleeding. The former serviceman did not approach his wife again, explaining that he was in shock while a police officer was trying to provide first aid before the medics arrived. Colby did not come over or inquire about the situation. Instead, he casually talked outside with a patrol officer about music and video games. Upon learning that Kristen was no longer alive, He squeezed out a few tears but quickly regained his composure. At the station, Colby was asked the standard question about whether there was any life insurance on the deceased, to which he responded negatively but added that he was entitled to some minor payouts from the armed forces where he had served. Incidentally, Trickle began boasting about his accomplishments, noting that he had served in intelligence and was involved in special operations around the world. His words sounded convincing, though it soon turned out that almost none of what he said was true. When asked why, in his opinion, his wife might have taken such a desperate step, he replied that she had suffered from prolonged depression from an early age, which developed against the backdrop of all the events that happened to her in childhood and adolescence. He mentioned her mother's betrayal, her father's death, and her forced life in her uncle and aunt's home, whom Kristen did not even know before. The widower's words again sounded convincing, and he spoke confidently and calmly. Nonetheless, experienced investigators felt that this man was lying and possibly had premeditated what to say. However, at that moment, they had nothing to charge him with, as there were no concrete pieces of evidence against him, so Mr. Trickle had to be released. Kristen's family's perspective: when Kristen's uncle, aunt, and her siblings were informed of the tragedy, they immediately traveled to Hayes, nearly 500 miles from their city, to speak with the police and prepare for the funeral. Unanimously, they vehemently denied the possibility that she could have willingly ended her life, citing her deep religious faith, regular church attendance, and her belief that such an act was a sin. Additionally, according to her family, Kristen was a life-loving optimist with ambitious future plans. Specifically, she wanted to open a shelter for homeless animals and had even scoped out an available property with a large plot of land she intended to lease long-term for this purpose. These statements were soon verified, and detectives confirmed that she had been negotiating to rent the property. Moreover, she was anticipating a promotion at work, a position she was very proud of, was preparing her costume and candies for Halloween, and had promised to visit her sister for her birthday in mid-November. Her relatives also insisted that she had never suffered from depression, had no mental disorders or harmful habits. Another crucial point they stressed was that she would never recklessly abandon her beloved dogs. During discussions with the police, the uncle and aunt suggested that Colby might have coldly dealt with his wife, orchestrating it to appear as though she had voluntarily left this world. They described her husband as a cruel and domineering man who tried to control every aspect of her interactions, chose whom she could communicate with, and would fly into a rage if Kristen did not respond to his calls or messages immediately. He also forbade her from talking to her relatives, and she would call them secretly from her husband. Visits were rare, but during her last visit, she confided that she could no longer tolerate such treatment, had talked with her husband about it, and if things did not change, they would have to separate. Following conversations with both the widower and the deceased relatives, detectives believed that the forensic examination would be decisive in the case. The examination revealed only one entry wound from a bullet located on the chin. The shot had been fired while the woman was lying on her back with the gun barrel pressed closely to her head. It was possible that she could have inflicted the wound herself, although it would have been extremely awkward for her to do so. There were no signs of struggle or resistance on Kristen's body. However, upon learning from relatives that Colby was a true tyrant with controlling behavior, the detectives insisted on an additional examination for any signs of bruises, abrasions, scratches, or other injuries in various stages of healing. They hypothesized that if the former serviceman had occasionally been violent towards his wife, there would inevitably be some traces. Yet, the investigation was met with disappointment, as no internal or external injuries were found other than the gunshot wound. The investigation continued to scrutinize Colby, examining his personality, and it was revealed that he was a pathological liar. He lied so frequently and convincingly that it seemed he began to believe his own fabrications. It started with the fact that he had never been in any hot spots nor had any involvement with intelligence, despite having convinced everyone during the interrogation that he was telling the truth. The man lied to those around him about having a successful music career and high earnings. In reality, for the past several years, Kristen, who worked tirelessly, had been the main breadwinner for their family. Colby, on the other hand, scraped by with occasional gigs during holidays, spending the rest of his time playing video games. Despite his real talent, he lacked persistence, patience, and was hindered by his laziness. Furthermore, the police had a warrant to seize and examine gadgets owned by the couple, and this inspection yielded quite intriguing results. The deceased phone calendar was packed with scheduled activities ranging from haircuts to meetings with a real estate agent. Meanwhile, Colby's messages revealed that he had been openly flirting with another woman, even exchanging messages while at the police station. On a laptop in the living room, a search history that had been deleted was recovered, showing that shortly before the tragedy, there were queries about the payout amount for a life insurance policy in the event of death. This last aspect particularly interested the authorities. Checks revealed that Colby had lied again. 2 insurance policies had been taken out on his wife, with him as the beneficiary in the event of her death. These included military spouse insurance as well as a standard life insurance policy. The amounts involved were far from trivial, contrary to what the man had claimed. He had even calculated exactly what payouts he would be entitled to. Despite numerous inconsistencies in the case, direct allegations from the deceased relatives against Colby, and the existence of a clear motive for him, the decision ultimately hinged on the forensic expert's report. The document stated that there were no signs of violence on the body except for a single gunshot wound, suggesting that it was highly likely that the deceased had voluntarily ended her life. The case was closed and archived. By that time, the widower had already received the payouts due to him from a special insurance for U.S. Armed Forces spouses. He received nearly $50,000 and from the life insurance policy over $100,000. On the very day the money was deposited into his account, he ordered a life-sized realistic doll for intimate pleasures from an online store. He also purchased a new gaming console, an electric guitar, and expensive musical equipment and began spending the rest on clothes and entertainment nearly every evening in bars and restaurants. Colby was enjoying life, sparing no expense for himself, and genuinely believed that the story was over. With no evidence against him and thus no potential charges, he lived happily for about 2 years until a pivotal event occurred. In the summer of 2021, a new district prosecutor was appointed, to whom the detectives handling the Trickle case appealed for help. They requested permission to reopen the investigation, asserting they had little doubt that the widower had eliminated his wife, making it appear as though she had voluntarily departed from life. As proof, they presented all the peculiarities and discrepancies, pointed to the restored browser history, and highlighted the suspect's very unusual behavior and his clear motive. After reviewing the case materials, the prosecutor authorized the reopening of the case, and in July 2021, Trickle was finally taken into custody. He was charged with first-degree premeditated homicide and intentional misleading of the investigation. During his arrest, he remained calm and immediately contacted his lawyers, who began working on his defense right away. Colby's defense relied on the forensic pathologist's findings and argued that Kristen had suffered from chronic depression for many years and that her tragic departure was only a matter of time. Meanwhile, his lawyers tried to portray their client as a loving and caring husband, a valorous serviceman, and a devout person. The investigation could have hit a dead end, as it relied heavily on the same medical conclusion. Thus, the prosecution took an unprecedented step by bringing an experienced specialist to create a psychological profile of the deceased and analyze her emotional state just before the tragedy. This unusual method was termed a psychological autopsy or psychological exhumation. The psychiatrist conducted extensive work analyzing data from Kristen's mobile phone, her social media posts, her most recent photos, and also by interviewing her relatives, friends, and colleagues. Gathering and analyzing the information took months, but the expert's conclusion was clear. Kristen could not have intended to end her life given her short-term and long-term plans. The legal proceedings in this complex case began only in September 2023, nearly 4 years after the tragedy. The defendant had a clear motive, behaved suspiciously, and consistently lied during interrogations, but the forensic expert's conclusion initially worked in his favor. However, the prosecution now had another report that could potentially turn the case around. When Colby was questioned about the insurance inquiries on his computer, he claimed they were probably made by his wife, wanting to know the payout amount. However, the date and time of the request completely contradicted his words, as the girl was confirmed to be at work at that time, verified by surveillance footage from the store. Asked about the life-size doll for intimate pleasures that he purchased even before his late wife was buried in other expenses, He responded that he couldn't sleep alone and needed someone to hold, and that he bought the console, guitar, etc. as a way to distract himself from grief. His mother corroborated his statements, fiercely defending her son throughout the trial. The psychiatrist's conclusion about the victim's emotional state was pivotal. This meticulous work took time, but its results left no doubt that Kristen had not planned to end her life. Additionally, a curious detail emerged from the autopsy report regarding the bullet's trajectory angle. In the courtroom, the jury was shown the weapon used and the angle at which the bullet entered the girl's chin. Kristen was right-handed, but the nature of the wound suggested that either she shot with her left hand or someone positioned to her left had placed the gun to the head of the sleeping girl and fired. To life imprisonment with the possibility of parole no earlier than 50 years. The defendant never admitted his guilt, and all his appeals were rejected. Most curious and strange in this case, however, is that corrections regarding the cause of death were never made to the medical report. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you. On November 20th, 2023, the jury unanimously found Colby guilty on all counts, sentencing him. Psychologists often highlight 3 common reasons why teenagers commit offenses: the need for peer validation, substance abuse, and a sense of invincibility. In our focus today, we'll explore a tragic incident involving McKenzie Shirilla, a schoolgirl whose actions led to a devastating loss of life. Despite her upbringing in Strongsville, Ohio, McKenzie's behavior took a troubling turn as she grew older. She became increasingly selfish and reckless, dabbling in alcohol and drugs. Even in her adolescence, McKenzie exhibited a sense of entitlement and a disregard for consequences. Her story takes a darker turn when she became the perpetrator of a terrible tragedy that claimed 2 lives. Shockingly, McKenzie showed no remorse for her actions during the trial, even shifting her testimony multiple times. Born in August 2004, McKenzie was the 3rd child in her family. Despite her parents' efforts to raise her with love and care, she grew up demanding and selfish. McKenzie often got away with mischief and serious misdemeanors, fostering a sense of impunity. As the trial unfolded, McKenzie's confidence in evading consequences was shattered by the judge's verdict, leaving both her and her mother dumbfounded. But who is McKenzie Shirilla really? Stay tuned as we delve deeper into McKenzie's background and the events that led to this tragic outcome. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more updates on this story and others like it. Let's unravel the mystery together. McKenzie's childhood was marked by her amiable and open nature, noted by both classmates and teachers. However, as she grew older, her demeanor began to deteriorate significantly. She became prone to real tantrums, easily losing her temper and behaving impudently. McKenzie's interactions were marked by a disregard for others' opinions, always insisting on having the final word and prioritizing her own interests above all else. During adolescence, McKenzie's behavior became increasingly challenging. While her parents attributed this to the transitional age, her actions were far from typical teenage rebellion. In high school, McKenzie's troubles extended beyond her demeanor. She developed a concerning pattern of alcohol addiction and occasional experimentation with illegal drugs. Despite the reckless nature of her actions, she often escaped serious consequences. McKenzie's social circle mirrored her behavior, indulging in vandalism, fights, and even theft. Despite brushes with the law, they were met with warnings and educational talks, reinforcing their belief in their own invulnerability. In contrast, Dominic Russo, a fellow Strongsville native born in September 2001, led a markedly different life. Raised in a large, loving family, Dominic excelled academically and remained actively engaged in sports. Despite the strict yet nurturing environment, Dominic enjoyed a wide circle of friends and maintained a balanced lifestyle. Dominic was accustomed to commanding attention and effortlessly became the life of any gathering. With his striking appearance and engaging personality, he naturally drew admirers from a young age. However, he remained focused on meaningful connections, steering clear of fleeting romances and prioritizing serious relationships. After graduating from high school, Dominic pursued his passion for music by enrolling in a local university, majoring in performing arts production. His dream was to carve out a career as a renowned music producer. Alongside his studies, Dominic showcased his versatility by writing and performing his own songs. By the age of 20, he had established his own small business, purchased a car, and secured a cozy apartment in a desirable neighborhood. He maintained his active lifestyle, continuing to excel in sports, while also earning recognition as one of the top students at the university. It was during this time that Dominic's path intersected with McKenzie's for the first time, sparking a connection that would change both of their lives forever. Their initial encounter occurred at a party among mutual friends, an event that would prove fateful for them both.
Dominic, a handsome and musically inclined young man with curly hair, immediately caught McKenzie's attention.
Unlike the guys she typically associated with, Dominic stood out for his education, manners, and ability to engage in thoughtful conversations. Meanwhile, McKenzie, with her striking appearance, slim figure, and impeccable style, turned on her charm to captivate Dominic's interest. Their chemistry was undeniable, leading them to swiftly embark on a romantic journey together in the fall of 2021. As their relationship blossomed, they introduced each other to their respective families. While McKenzie's parents embraced Dominic warmly, viewing them as an ideal match for their daughter, Dominic's parents harbored reservations about McKenzie. The parents of the young man harbored mixed feelings about his relationship with McKenzie. On one hand, McKenzie presented herself as sweet, innocent, and eager to make a good impression. However, something about her raised immediate concerns for Frank and Christine Russo. Friends and family of Shirilla believed that McKenzie had truly fallen in love for the first time in her life, and hoped that the relationship would positively influence her character and behavior. Little did they anticipate the tragic turn that this youthful romance would take. As the couple began to appear together publicly, displaying affection and tenderness, word of their relationship quickly spread throughout the small town. While some who knew McKenzie well felt sympathetic toward Dominic, most were simply happy for the couple. However, Dominic soon began to notice peculiarities in McKenzie's behavior. Her defiant actions and insistence on having her way began to trouble him. Initially, Dominic attributed these behaviors to McKenzie's youth and desire for attention. The couple made plans for their future, including marriage once McKenzie turned 18, and dreamed of moving to New York City for Dominic's music career. However, McKenzie's behavior grew increasingly alarming and even frightening. She demanded that Dominic comply with her wishes, throwing tantrums and acting like a petulant child when he disagreed. At first, Dominic attempted to brush off McKenzie's behavior with humor, but as her actions became more aggressive, he realized the true nature of his partner. McKenzie's public demeanor remained composed, but in private she unleashed her emotions on Dominic, sometimes resorting to physical violence. Eventually, Dominic decided he had endured enough and suggested they take a break to reassess their relationship. McKenzie's response was explosive. She publicly confronted Dominic, issuing threats and hurling insults, displaying signs of obsessive behavior. Despite Dominic's firm stance on ending the relationship, McKenzie persisted in her attempts to win him back, resorting to stalking and harassment tactics, including daily visits to his home where she unleashed a torrent of abuse and threats. She resorted to relentless tactics, calling him from various numbers, leaving messages on his voicemail, and bombarding him with emails and social media posts. At times, McKenzie professed her love and pleaded for a fresh start, only to quickly switch to insults and threats. Russo found himself bewildered, unsure of how to respond to such behavior, as he had never encountered anything like it before. He attempted to reason with her, ignored her advances, and even recorded her outbursts on his phone a couple of times. McKenzie's actions escalated to the point where she would publicly berate and insult Russo whenever they crossed paths on the street or in other public places, turning his life into a living nightmare. Despite his hope that she would eventually relent and leave him alone, he endured her relentless pursuit, clinging to the belief that she would eventually move on to someone else. One day, in front of witnesses, McKenzie chillingly declared that it would be easier for her to kill Russo than to let him go. She threatened that if he didn't return to her, she would ensure that nobody else could have him. Although Russo initially brushed off these threats, those around him recognized the seriousness of McKenzie's intentions. Among her most frequent threats were promises to physically harm Russo, including running him over with a car, driving off a cliff with him in the car, or stopping on railroad tracks in front of an oncoming train. Each scenario sounded terrifying, leaving Russo in a constant state of fear and uncertainty. McKenzie's demeanor shifted as if she had meticulously orchestrated her actions, waiting for the opportune moment to stage an unexpected reconciliation. Realizing that her threats and insults were driving Dominic further away, she opted for a change in strategy. McKenzie reverted to being sweet and charming, ceasing her attempts to pressure and harass her ex-boyfriend. Instead, she feigned remorse, expressing a desire to rectify her past mistakes and improve herself. She engaged Dominic in discussions about future plans, seeking his advice on university enrollment, and emphasized her newfound focus on academics, particularly her upcoming exams. These apparent changes pleasantly surprised Dominic, who, despite everything, still harbored affection for McKenzie. Moved by compassion, he agreed to assist her with university enrollment, leading to a resumption of their interaction. As they spent more time together, the couple grew closer, with Dominic believing that McKenzie had genuinely transformed, becoming more mature and responsible. Unbeknownst to him, his feelings for her rekindled, overshadowing past grievances. However, this time, they chose to keep their reunion discreet, refraining from public announcements. Their meetings resembled clandestine rendezvous, where they relished each other's company, avoiding the scrutiny of others. When Dominic's brother Angelo caught wind of the situation, he warned that it spelled trouble. However, Dominic, blinded by love, brushed aside his concerns. Unbeknownst to Dominic, while he basked in the joy of reuniting with McKenzie and the perceived changes in her, McKenzie was crafting a chilling scheme against him. Enthralled by the notion of a dramatic car crash, McKenzie meticulously mapped out her plan. Spending countless hours driving around the city, McKenzie scouted for an ideal location to execute her plan. Unable to find suitable cliffs or railway tracks, she stumbled upon an isolated industrial area with a towering brick wall. Seeing the wall, McKenzie's twisted imagination sparked a sinister idea. She envisioned a spectacular crash into the wall, intending for both of them to perish and their story to become legendary in the city. Despite confiding in her best friend about her plan, others dismissed it as mere fantasy, given McKenzie's history of impractical notions. As July 2022 drew to a close, just a week before her milestone birthday, McKenzie proposed to Dominic that they attend a party hosted by mutual friends. Viewing it as a chance to enjoy themselves and showcase their rekindled love, Dominic eagerly accepted her invitation, still trusting in McKenzie's sincerity. On the night of Saturday, July 30th, Dominic and McKenzie arrived at the party hand in hand, radiating happiness and affection. Their presence captured the attention of everyone around them, who admired the apparent harmony in their relationship. Throughout the evening, they reveled in each other's company, freely displaying their affection without inhibition. Unbeknownst to the attendees, McKenzie clandestinely consumed illegal drugs to bolster her resolve for what lay ahead. As dawn approached, Dominic and McKenzie bid farewell to their friends and made their way to the car. However, their plans took an unforeseen turn when Dave Flanagan, a friend of Dominic's, requested a ride home. Despite McKenzie's reluctance, Dominic agreed, unwittingly sealing Dave's fate. With McKenzie behind the wheel, Dominic in the passenger seat, and Dave seated behind them, the car set off into the night. McKenzie drove cautiously, avoiding drawing any undue attention as they navigated the empty streets. Once more, McKenzie contemplated her plan as her passengers drifted into slumber. Later, she claimed she intended to perish in the crash. However, her assertion was dubious, evidenced by her act of fastening her seatbelt during the last stop while her companions remained unbuckled. Upon the traffic lights' shift to green, she accelerated swiftly, veering onto a dimly lit secondary road leading to an industrial area. Initially unaware, her passengers gradually realized the gravity of the situation, feeling as if a malevolent force possessed the driver. Despite their shock, McKenzie relentlessly pressed the gas pedal, hurtling the car toward a stark brick wall. In the early hours of Sunday morning, the industrial area lay deserted, save for a lone resident who heard the impact and rushed to investigate. Discovering the wreckage, she promptly called emergency services. Medics arrived swiftly, but despite their efforts, McKenzie's passengers succumbed to their injuries on the scene. Trapped in the wreckage, McKenzie remained unconscious, her legs ensnared in the twisted metal. Despite her injuries, her vital signs were stable, offering a glimmer of hope amid the tragedy. Rescued and transported to the hospital, McKenzie's injuries were assessed, revealing fractures and internal damage. Blood tests confirmed the influence of alcohol and drugs, which may have ironically mitigated the shock from her injuries, preventing immediate demise. Initially, investigators speculated McKenzie's impaired state led to the crash, presuming she was unaware of her actions. However, her unconscious state precluded interrogation, leaving the true nature of events shrouded in mystery. Following a complex surgical procedure, McKenzie gradually regained consciousness. Overwhelmed by remorse and the realization of her actions, she tearfully confided in the attending doctor, admitting her deliberate act of speeding into the wall with the intent to kill her boyfriend, intending to perish alongside him. McKenzie also attributed Dave's presence in the car to his persistence, branding him an unwitting casualty. However, the doctor dismissed McKenzie's confession as a product of post-operative confusion, attributing it to anesthesia, pain medication, and emotional distress. When authorities later questioned McKenzie, her testimony underwent a drastic shift. She claimed partial amnesia, citing alcohol and drug consumption, asserting she couldn't recall the events of that fateful night, including Dave's presence in the vehicle. Despite her assertions, evidence contradicted McKenzie's account, challenging her narrative of events. The surveillance cameras meticulously traced the initial segment of the car's journey, revealing McKenzie's adherence to traffic laws until she abruptly veered onto a road leading to an industrial zone. Additionally, it emerged that McKenzie had traversed the entire route multiple times in the preceding days, with her car spotted by numerous witnesses. Upon her hospital discharge, McKenzie swiftly endeavored to resume her former carefree lifestyle, exhibiting no remorse and displaying confidence in evading consequences. Returning to her active presence on social media, she socialized with friends and made future plans. In September, she attended a concert of her favorite band in a neighboring city despite her ongoing recovery. Not even the incomplete healing of her leg bones deterred her from appearing on stage in a wheelchair, adorned with vibrant makeup and taking selfies with friends. By October, fully embracing life once more, McKenzie partook in Halloween celebrations, dressed in a pre-made costume. She relished every moment, forging new connections along the way. However, on November 4, 2022, she was apprehended, marking the commencement of her trial and subsequent sentencing. The investigation spanned just over 3 months, culminating in McKenzie's legal proceedings. The gathering of essential evidence facilitated the prosecution's case against McKenzie, who faced charges of premeditated aggravated double murder and possession and use of a controlled substance, discovered both in her pocket and bloodstream. Throughout the legal proceedings, McKenzie altered her testimony multiple times, initially claiming memory lapses and later asserting a desire to perish alongside her lover. However, inconsistencies arose, notably her prior act of securing herself with a seatbelt. Found guilty on all charges, McKenzie's status as a minor at the time of the crime, just 5 days shy of her 18th birthday, warranted consideration. While eligible for consecutive sentences of 15 years for each murder, served concurrently due to her youth, McKenzie could seek parole in 15 years at the age of 33. Both sides expressed discontent with the court's ruling. The victims' families sought a harsher sentence, while McKenzie's legal team deemed it excessive and filed an appeal. Nonetheless, the judge upheld the original sentence, doubting McKenzie's remorse and emphasizing the gravity of her actions. As McKenzie begins her incarceration, she faces introspection regarding her atrocious deed. These days, ugly divorces are all too common. Thankfully, even the most contentious separations rarely end in violence. However, in mid-February 2022, a Florida couple's bitter divorce made front-page news when Jared Bridegan, a young husband and father, was gunned down after dropping off his children at his ex-wife Shanna's home in Northeast Florida. The circumstances surrounding the murder were suspicious from the start. Shanna was a person of interest from the very beginning,
though she always maintained her innocence.
We're gonna bring you inside real quick. Get you out of the
to do with the crime.
car, right?
However, between January and August 2023, she, her new husband, and an acquaintance
were arrested and charged with various crimes, including Jared's murder. It is important to note that neither Shanna nor her co-defendants have been convicted of any crime at this time, and they are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Before we delve into the details, we would like to extend our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of Jared Bridegan and all who loved and miss him. Jared Bridegan and Shanna Lee Gardner both came from Mormon families. Shanna grew up in Utah, where her parents were successful and wealthy entrepreneurs. Jared was born in rural Missouri, but his family moved to Florida when he was young. More than 2 decades later, he met Shanna while visiting a friend in Florida. Jared was a confident and likable young man with a good head on his shoulders, and Shanna was a beautiful young woman with a magnetic personality. At that point, both were devout members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It seemed like a match made in heaven. After a whirlwind romance, a whirlwind courtship that lasted less than a year, the smitten couple officially tied the knot in Salt Lake City in 2010. They initially lived in Orem, Utah, where Jared was a full-time student at Utah Valley University. For nearly 4 years, Shanna's wealthy parents were their primary means of financial support, providing approximately $8,000 each month to cover tuition, rent, food, and utilities. With Jared not working, he focused nearly all his energy on his studies. Shanna's parents hoped that their financial support would pay off once Jared earned his bachelor's degree in digital media and secured a good job. However, this support was a constant source of tension between Shanna, her parents, and Jared. According to some sources, Shanna's parents believed Jared took the money for granted and felt entitled to it. Despite these issues, Jared graduated in 2014, and he and Shanna moved to Connecticut shortly afterward. This was the first time they were truly on their own, but the transition was rocky. Before long, Jared began hearing rumors that his wife was having an affair with her personal trainer. Shanna denied the allegations, but despite the growing friction, they eventually became the proud parents of twins, a boy and a girl. Later, they moved over 1,000 miles, 1,900 kilometers, south to sunny Florida because their son had a heart condition that required him to breathe relatively warm air at or near sea level. By early 2015, Shanna was spending less time at home and more time at the gym and a local tattoo and piercing business, where she made new friends and got some body piercings. As a traditional Mormon, Jared did not approve of his wife's new friends or her lifestyle. The truth was that they no longer shared the same values. Friends, family members, and co-workers noticed they had grown apart, and some even detected palpable animosity between them. Shanna eventually became so fed up that she allegedly asked one tattoo artist if they knew anyone who could shut Jared up. It is unclear if she made this statement in jest or if she genuinely wanted him hurt or even killed. Whatever the case, Shanna filed for divorce in February 2015. Jared wasn't altogether surprised, but he wasn't happy that Shanna wanted primary custody of their 2 children. Jared was determined to fight this demand, leading to a long and contentious legal battle. In 2015, Jared and Shanna divorced. Court records obtained from the St. Johns County court system reveal a complicated process lasting over 5 years. During the proceedings, both Shanna and Jared leveled numerous unsavory accusations against each other, which is common in contentious custody battles. While the veracity of these claims remains uncertain, the court ultimately ruled that both were fit parents and should share custody. They agreed to exchange the twins at regular intervals, and initially the arrangement worked. After the divorce, Shanna embraced her newfound independence. She continued to spend as much time as possible with her children. As much as she could, Shanna also founded a successful baking company and found a new love interest in Mario Fernandez Solana.
When they met in 2018, he was a maintenance man at the gym near Jacksonville Beach where she regularly worked out. They got married the following year. Shanna's new husband added another layer of stress to an already tense situation, but by then, Jared had remarried as well. He described his new wife, Kristen, as his best friend and eternal companion. Jared and Kristen eventually had 2 children of their own. Early in their marriage, things were going so well that Jared took time out of his busy schedule to make Facebook posts, where he laid out the 3 cornerstones of his existence. The first was his faith, the second was his wife Kristen, and the third were his 4 children, who meant the world to him. By 2022, Jared was 33 years old and a senior Microsoft design manager with a loving family and a bright future. His unpleasant divorce from Shanna was little more than a speck in the rearview mirror. As far as he knew, she was happy with her new life, as he was with his. Jared, Kristen, and their 2 children lived in St. Augustine, Florida, and his twins from his first marriage with Shanna regularly visited. On the evening of Wednesday, February 16, 2022, Jared loaded his 2-year-old daughter Bexley from his second marriage and his 9-year-old twins from the first marriage into his Volkswagen Atlas and drove to Shanna's house in Jacksonville Beach, about 40 miles, 64 kilometers away. This was a weekly routine since Jared and Shanna had joint custody of the children. The first leg of the trip was uneventful, and about an hour later, he dropped off the children at their mother's home and began heading back towards St. Augustine with his daughter, still strapped in the booster seat in the back. Jared noticed a spare tire and rim in the road directly in front of him as they passed an exclusive gated community called The Sanctuary, just a few miles from Shanna's home. He could have easily driven around it and let someone else deal with it. That's probably what many would have done. But Jared had a solid work ethic and a clear sense of right and wrong. The tire was obviously a safety hazard, and he knew it could even cause an accident if he didn't get it out of the travel lane. Unsurprisingly, he brought the car to a stop, flipped on the emergency flashers, got out, and walked over to roll the tire onto the shoulder. What happened next isn't entirely clear, but apparently as he bent down to grab the tire, a gunman or gunmen emerged from the darkness and shot him multiple times at close range. The deafening cracks ripped through the otherwise quiet night, and just a fraction of a second later, Jared fell to the ground with a sickening thud. Sadly, no one witnessed the crime, and whoever committed the heinous act disappeared into the darkness. Kristen became anxious when numerous calls to Jared's phone went unanswered. Later that evening, shortly after the shooting, a bystander drove by the horrific scene and called 911. When first responders arrived, the tire and Jared's lifeless body were still in the middle of the road. Jared wasn't armed, and there were no signs of a struggle or a fight. Thankfully, they found 2-year-old Bexley crying but unharmed in the car. Jared's daughter was still strapped in her car seat behind him, and though unharmed, was dangerously close to the gunfire. According to the initial Jacksonville Beach Police Department report, officers were told that she was worried about her dad, but did not see what happened. Later, Jacksonville Beach investigators arrived and meticulously examined every inch of the crime scene. They knew that jumping to premature conclusions was unwise, but they didn't think they were dealing with a random crime or even a crime of opportunity. After all, whoever gunned Jared down did not take his child, his vehicle, his wallet, his wedding ring, or anything of value from inside the car. Based on the odd nature of the crime scene, they concluded that someone had intentionally placed the tire in the road, suggesting a staged ambush. If the tire had randomly fallen out of the back of a passing pickup truck, there was almost no chance a good Samaritan who stopped to move it would have been killed. They didn't know whether Jared was the intended target or if he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but they were confident that the true nature of the crime would come to light as the investigation progressed. Jared's wife, Kristen, was shocked, devastated, and utterly bewildered when she found out that her beloved husband had been gunned down in cold blood. When Jared's ex-wife Shanna heard the news, she told the Florida Times-Union that she couldn't imagine what his family was going through, and that under the circumstances, the best thing she could do was to give them their space. But as the murder made headlines across Florida and the rest of the country, Shanna and Jared Bridegan's ugly divorce would be dragged into the light. As the weeks passed, the unthinkable tragedy remained fresh in the hearts and minds of Jared's friends and loved ones. Kind words, prayers, and emotional support poured in from all over the world. However, closer to home, Shanna did not attend the private memorial service held in Jared's honor. According to her mother, Shanna wasn't invited. In a blog post, Shanna's mother stated, "I asked Shanna about the situation. She told me his family did not invite me or want me there." By then, a few pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place, but security footage from several homes and businesses near the crime scene threatened to blow the case wide open. Some grainy images showed a dark, 2004 to 2008 Ford F-150 pickup truck with running boards and a toolbox in the back, seen in the area at the time of the murder. Unfortunately, neither the license plate nor any other distinguishing marks were visible. Worse yet, Florida is full of dark 2000-something F-150 pickup trucks matching the one in the photo. Investigators knew they had their work cut out for them, but eventually they would find out who the truck was registered to. It is unclear if the information came as a direct result of the $55,000 reward that had been offered, but officers made an unannounced visit to the truck owner's residence shortly thereafter. Neither the pickup truck nor its owner was there, but they found a tire leaning against the side of the house that bore a striking resemblance to the one in the road the night Jared was murdered. Officers took the tire as evidence back to the station. They found it was the same size, had the same tread pattern, and was manufactured on the same date as the one taken from the crime scene. In other words, the two tires were nearly identical. This suggested they had probably been purchased together and used on the same vehicle at one time or another. Shanna and her family did their best to stay out of the public eye as investigators continued to work the case. She also hired a PR firm and a prominent Florida defense attorney, Henry Hank Cox, because she was tired of being hounded by journalists and having images of her and her family used without her consent. She said that the tense and often unfair media coverage made her children feel unsafe and that some media outlets had even implied she had something to do with Jared's murder. Shanna just wanted everyone to respect her privacy and leave her family alone. However, in early July 2022, she granted an exclusive interview to WJAX TV Action News Jack's anchorwoman Kristen Trickle. During the interview, Shanna said she had remained silent for so long because Jared's widow, Kristen, had asked her to, but she felt it was finally time to speak out due to the intense scrutiny and rampant speculation around the case. As her innocence has come into question, Shanna Gardner spoke to me in the only TV interview
she says she'll be doing to tell her side of the story.
We're going to bring you inside real quick.
I do want people to understand
car,
where I'm coming from, Shanna said. Almost 5 months after Jared Bridegan was murdered in the street in front of
his 2-year-old daughter, we spoke with his ex-wife, who had not commented publicly so far. Our first question, why have you stayed silent? I was asked to not talk to the media or give a public statement, but with the level of speculation, I felt that now it was necessary to speak out, Shanna Gardner revealed. She was asked by Jared Bridegan's widow, Kristen, not to speak publicly. Shortly into the interview, viewers across the country watched intently as Kristen Trickle finally asked the question everyone had been waiting for. Did you have anything to do with Jared's murder? No, I did not have anything to do with his murder, Shanna replied. Unsurprisingly, Shanna denied any knowledge or involvement in Jared's murder, as she had done from the very beginning. Then, she and the twins moved to Washington State without Mario in mid-March 2023, shortly after she dropped his last name for her maiden name, Caitlin. Do you have any sense as to why she moved without her husband? We don't at this point, but the timing of that, as you say, we do not believe in coincidences. The timing of that is really striking. Nobody knew for sure why Mario did not join them, but it appeared as though Shanna's second marriage was on the rocks. This could have serious repercussions at the trial if Shanna and Mario turned on one another, but only time would tell. On January 25, 2023, nearly a year after Jared's murder, Florida State Prosecutor Melissa Nelson and Jacksonville Beach Police Chief Gene Paul Smith made a remarkable announcement. Earlier that day, a 61-year-old man named Henry Arthur Tennant had been arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and second-degree murder with a weapon, an accessory to a capital felony after the fact and child abuse.
Police Chief Smith also stated that Jared was the target of an ambush and that the tire was intentionally placed along the route he traveled from his ex-wife's home. Prosecutor Nelson mentioned that the case was still active, but at that point, she declined to say if she thought Shanna had anything to do with the murder. Tennant originally pleaded not guilty, but 2 months later, he changed his plea to guilty as the case against him strengthened. Arrest records showed that Tennant was a convicted felon with numerous weapons charges, and he had previously rented a home from Shanna's second husband, Mario Fernandez Solana. Additionally, the arrest warrant stated that he had received 3 checks from Mario in October of 2022, just months before Jared was murdered. Phone records indicated the two men had communicated nearly 36 times in February 2023. After Tennant's arraignment in the Duval County Courthouse, Kristen Brian made a poignant public plea, asking him to do the right thing by telling investigators and prosecutors everything he knew about the murder. Tennant was the first person to be arrested and charged in connection with Jared's murder, but he was not the last. Nearly 2 months later, on March 16, 2023, 35-year-old Mario Fernandez Solana was also arrested in Orange County, Florida. He was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation to commit a capital felony, and child abuse. He pleaded not guilty to all the charges. Ironically, he was arrested on the same day that State Attorney Melissa Nelson announced that Henry Arthur Tennant had pled guilty to second-degree murder and admitted to being the trigger man. In return for his plea, the state agreed to waive sentencing guidelines and drop the charges of conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to a capital felony after the fact, and child abuse, all of which were punishable by up to 30 years in prison. This meant that, at the end of the trial, his prison sentence would be decades shorter than it would have been otherwise. However, the deal was contingent upon him testifying truthfully against his co-defendants. Then, on August 17, 2023, gun-wielding ATF agents unexpectedly showed up at Shanna's home in West Richland, Washington. At the time, she was inside with her children. Thankfully, she surrendered voluntarily and cooperated with the agents, but the episode must have been unimaginably stressful for her and her children. Before agents whisked Shanna away, she told a neighbor who had come to witness the arrest that she now had custody of the children. Since Shanna was arrested in a different state from where the murder was committed, she would be held on a fugitive warrant until extradition could be arranged. A Washington judge informed her that she had the right to demand that the state of Florida secure a governor's warrant before she was extradited to Duval County. The following is a transcript of the court proceedings. Good afternoon, everyone. I believe we are here on the matter of Shanna Gardner, is that correct? That's correct, Your Honor. Andrew Wagley on behalf of the defendant. I just put in a notice of appearance, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Wagley. Good afternoon. I do have an advisement that I need to go over with your client before we get started. You are being held on a fugitive warrant because it is alleged by complaint that you have committed a felony in the demanding state. A copy of the complaint outlining the charges should be provided to you. You have the right to require that the demanding state secure a governor's warrant for your return to the demanding state. In the event the demanding state does secure a governor's warrant, the governor of Washington will then issue a formal order authorizing your extradition back to the demanding state. You have the right to seek a writ of habeas corpus, challenging the constitutionality of your detention. However, this was just a legal formality, and Shanna was ultimately extradited to Florida in October 2023. According to Prosecutor Nelson, the state plans to try Shanna and Mario Fernandez Solana together and will seek the death penalty for each defendant. That's right, Anthony. The state intends to try Shanna Gardner and Mario Fernandez together for the murder of Jared Bridegan, but already the two defendants appear drastically different in court. Neither the indictment nor the affidavit filed by Jacksonville Beach Detective C.L. Johns revealed the alleged motive behind the crime. However, shortly after the heavily redacted affidavit was made public, Prosecutor Nelson reiterated that Henry Arthur Tennant was the gunman and that Shanna Gardner and Mario Fernandez Solana helped to plan and coordinate the murder. After the arrest, Kristen Brian and Jared's brother Adam gave an interview to local television station News 4 Jax. Kristen said she always suspected that the murder was planned, that Jared was the intended target, and that Tennant had not acted alone.
Later in the interview, Adam mentioned that he and Jared had several heart-to-heart talks in the months leading up to his brother's death, and on more than one occasion, Jared expressed fear for his life. Unfortunately, Adam did not reveal who Jared said he was afraid of. Shortly after her husband's murder, Kristen Bryan appeared on the Dr. Phil show. When asked about Shanna Gardner's claims of innocence, she said, "I have never found Shanna to be a truthful person, so I don't put a lot of weight into what she said." She also added that Shanna's post-murder emotions seemed disingenuous and manufactured. "Was there anything in particular that stuck out to you about her demeanor?" Dr. Phil asked. "You know her, and I don't. The fact that she seems to me to be trying to be emotional, there's no tears, there's no real emotion there. It doesn't come across as genuine to me," Kristen replied. While she never explicitly stated whether she believed Shanna was involved in Jared's murder, her comments implied that she did. Either way, Kristen was confident that Jared's killers would be brought to justice sooner or later. In the meantime, Kristen focused on staying busy, taking care of her children, and honoring Jared's legacy by founding the Bryan Foundation. The foundation's main goal is to provide comfort for children in stressful situations, just like 2-year-old Bexley Bryan was on the night her father was murdered. To do this, the foundation provides Bexley boxes, filled with toys, books, blankets, and other items to police departments across the country. Officers generally give these boxes to children whose parents have been arrested or murdered, or when they are removed from abusive or unfit homes. By August 2023, it appeared that investigators and prosecutors had cracked the nefarious murder-for-hire plot. In the quiet suburb of Millbrook, nestled just outside the bustling city of Hartford, Connecticut, a heinous crime shattered the illusion of peaceful suburban life. On a crisp autumn morning in September 2018, the body of 17-year-old Sarah Thompson was discovered in the woods behind her family's home. The gruesome scene sent shockwaves through the community, leaving residents locked behind their doors and whispering about the killer who walked among them. Detective Michael Carter, a seasoned investigator with the Hartford Police Department, was called to lead the case. With his sharp intuition and unwavering dedication, Carter delved into the intricate web of lies and deceit surrounding Sarah's murder. Little did he know that this case would challenge his perceptions and force him to confront the darkest aspects of human nature. As the investigation unfolded, suspicion initially fell on Sarah's stepmother, Amanda Wilson. The troubled relationship between the two had been no secret to their neighbors, and Amanda's apparent jealousy of her stepdaughter seemed to provide a motive. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly straightforward case lay a twisted tale of betrayal, secrets, and fatal consequences. At the center of this tragedy stood Robert Wilson, Sarah's stepfather, a respected businessman and pillar of the community. Robert appeared to be the grieving father figure, supporting his wife through their shared loss. But as Detective Carter would soon discover, Robert's carefully constructed facade concealed a web of lies that would ultimately lead to his downfall. This is the story of a murder that tore apart a family, challenged a detective's instincts, and revealed the devastating consequences of unchecked desire and betrayal. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators are hiding in plain sight, wearing the mask of normalcy in our very own neighborhoods. Sarah Thompson was a vibrant and promising young woman whose life was tragically cut short just weeks before her 18th birthday. Born to single mother Amanda Thompson in 2001, Sarah grew up as a bright and curious child, always eager to learn and explore the world around her. From an early age, Sarah showed a passion for art and literature. Her teachers often praised her creativity and insightful essays, marking her as a student with great potential. Sarah's artwork adorned the walls of her high school, and she had recently begun to explore photography, capturing the beauty of nature in the woods behind her home, the same woods that would ultimately become the site of her untimely death. Despite her academic and artistic achievements, Sarah's home life was far from perfect. When she was 12, her mother married Robert Wilson, a successful local businessman. While Sarah initially welcomed the stability Robert brought to their lives, the relationship between stepdaughter and stepfather grew increasingly strained as Sarah entered her teenage years. Friends and classmates described Sarah as kind-hearted but fiercely independent. She had a small, tight-knit group of friends,
and was known for standing up against bullying in school. Her best friend Emily Chun recalled Sarah's dream of studying journalism at NYU, aspiring to become an investigative reporter and uncover truths hidden beneath the surface. Sarah's relationship with her mother, Amanda, had always been complex. As an only child, Sarah had been the center of Amanda's world for years. However, the arrival of Robert in their lives created a shift in dynamics. Sarah often felt that her mother prioritized her new marriage over their mother-daughter bond, leading to frequent arguments and emotional distance. In the months leading up to her death, those close to Sarah noticed a change in her demeanor. She became more withdrawn, spending increased time alone in her room or wandering in the woods with her camera. Her art took on darker themes, and her usually meticulous schoolwork began to slip. Emily remembered Sarah seeming distracted and worried, but when pressed, Sarah would brush off concerns with a forced smile and a change of subject. What no one knew at the time was that Sarah had stumbled upon a secret that would prove fatal. In her quest for truth and her natural curiosity, she had uncovered something that someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. Sarah Thompson's young life, full of promise and potential, was snuffed out just as she stood on the threshold of adulthood, leaving behind a community in mourning and a mystery that would shake Millbrook to its core. Robert Wilson, aged 45 at the time of Sarah's murder, presented himself as the epitome of suburban success. A charismatic and well-respected financial advisor, Robert had built a thriving practice in Hartford, managing the wealth of some of the city's most affluent residents. His polished appearance and confident demeanor made him a natural leader in the community, serving on the local chamber of commerce and coaching youth soccer. Born and raised in a working-class family in Boston, Robert had clawed his way up the social ladder through a combination of charm, intelligence, and ruthless ambition. He met Amanda Thompson at a charity gala in 2012, and their whirlwind romance culminated in marriage just 8 months later. To the outside world, Robert appeared to be the perfect husband and stepfather, providing stability and financial security to Amanda and Sarah. However, beneath the veneer of success and respectability, Robert harbored dark secrets and unfulfilled desires. His marriage to Amanda had quickly lost its luster, and he found himself drawn to the excitement of an illicit affair. For the past year, Robert had been involved in a passionate relationship with Elena Gonzalez, the wife of his next-door neighbor and close friend, David. Robert's affair with Elena was more than just a physical attraction. He felt truly alive in her presence, experiencing a connection he believed he had never shared with Amanda. The two lovers would meet in secret, stealing moments of passion while their spouses were at work or running errands. Robert became expert at lying and manipulating those around him to maintain his double life. As Sarah entered her late teens, Robert found himself increasingly uncomfortable in her presence. Her perceptive nature and keen eye for detail made him paranoid that she might uncover his infidelity. He began to avoid spending time alone with his stepdaughter, making excuses to miss family dinners and events. Friends and colleagues described Robert as charming and generous, always ready with a joke or a helping hand. David Gonzalez, unaware of Robert's betrayal, often praised him as the best neighbor and friend a man could ask for. Robert's clients trusted him implicitly, drawn in by his confident assurances and impressive track record. Yet, those who knew Robert best sensed an underlying current of discontent. His assistant at the financial firm noted his increased irritability and distraction in the months leading up to Sarah's death. Robert's longtime friend from college, Mark Stevens, observed that Robert seemed to be living on edge, as if constantly looking over his shoulder. Little did anyone suspect that behind Robert Wilson's carefully crafted image lay a man capable of unspeakable acts, driven by desperation to protect his secrets and preserve his way of life at any cost. The grisly discovery was made on the morning of September 15, 2018, by a jogger on his usual trail through the woods behind the Wilson residence. The body of Sarah Thompson lay partially concealed beneath a pile of leaves and branches, a crude attempt at concealment that did little to hide the horrific nature of the crime. Detective Michael Carter arrived on the scene within the hour, his experienced eye taking in every detail. Sarah's body showed signs of a violent struggle. Bruises marred her arms and face, and defensive wounds on her hands indicated she had fought desperately for her life. The cause of death was immediately apparent: a jagged wound across her throat, likely inflicted with a serrated blade. As the forensics team combed the area for evidence, Carter noted several key details. Sarah's camera, which friends claimed she always carried on her woodland excursions, was missing. Drag marks and disturbed vegetation suggested the body had been moved from the initial site of the attack, possibly in an attempt to hide it from immediate discovery. Perhaps most tellingly, there were no signs of sexual assault, leading Carter to suspect that the motive for the murder was personal rather than opportunistic. The brutality of the attack pointed to a crime of passion, someone who knew Sarah and had been driven to a moment of uncontrollable rage. As news of the murder spread, the once peaceful community of Millbrook descended into a state of fear and suspicion. Neighbors who had previously left their doors unlocked now double-checked their security systems. Parents kept their children indoors, and the woods that had once been a place of recreation became a no-go zone, cordoned off with yellow police tape. Detective Michael Carter, a 20-year veteran of the Hartford Police Department, took charge of the investigation with grim determination. Known for his meticulous approach and uncanny ability to see connections others missed, Carter had solved some of the department's most challenging cases. As he stood in the Wilsons' living room, surveying the family photos on the mantel, he knew this case would test him like never before. The first 48 hours of the investigation were a whirlwind of activity. Carter and his team conducted initial interviews with family members, friends, and neighbors. Sarah's school records were examined, her social media accounts scrutinized, and her movements in the days leading up to her death were painstakingly reconstructed. Robert Wilson, appearing shell-shocked, provided a detailed account of his whereabouts on the night of the murder. He claimed to have been working late at his office, a fact corroborated by security footage and his assistant's testimony. Amanda Wilson, still visibly distraught, struggled to maintain composure during her interview. She admitted to having argued with Sarah the afternoon before her disappearance, but insisted it was just typical mother-daughter friction. As Carter delved deeper, a picture began to emerge of a household fraught with tension. Neighbors spoke of frequent arguments between Sarah and her mother, their raised voices often carrying across manicured lawns. Sarah's best friend, Emily Chun, revealed that Sarah had been increasingly unhappy at home, feeling trapped and misunderstood. The forensics team's initial findings provided more questions than answers. Trace evidence found on Sarah's clothing didn't match samples taken from Robert or Amanda. The murder weapon, likely a hunting knife or similar serrated blade, was nowhere to be found despite an extensive search of the Wilson property and surrounding areas. A breakthrough came when Carter interviewed Elena Gonzalez, the Wilsons' next-door neighbor. Elena, visibly nervous during the interview, mentioned that she had seen Sarah arguing with Amanda in the driveway the day before her disappearance. More intriguingly, Elena let slip that Amanda had always seemed jealous of her daughter's youth and beauty. This information, combined with the tumultuous home environment and Amanda's shaky alibi for the night of the murder, led Carter to focus his attention on Sarah's mother. He theorized that years of resentment had finally boiled over, resulting in a confrontation that turned deadly. As the investigation entered its second week, Carter felt confident they were on the right track. He obtained a warrant to search Amanda's personal belongings and communications, hoping to find the crucial piece of evidence that would break the case wide open. However, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of Carter's mind. Something about Robert Wilson's calm demeanor and perfect alibi struck him as too neat, too convenient. Little did Carter know that his instincts were leading him toward a truth far more sinister than he could have imagined. As the investigation progressed, all signs seemed to point toward Amanda Wilson as the prime suspect in her daughter's murder. Detective Carter, driven by the evidence at hand, began to build a case against the 42-year-old homemaker with a troubled past. Carter's team uncovered a series of heated text exchanges between Amanda and Sarah in the weeks leading up to the murder. In one particularly vicious argument, Amanda accused Sarah of trying to sabotage her marriage, while Sarah fired back, calling her mother a pathetic, jealous old woman. These digital breadcrumbs seemed to support the theory of a family dynamic that had reached a breaking point. Further fueling suspicion was Amanda's behavior in the aftermath of Sarah's death. While initially distraught, she quickly became defensive and evasive during questioning. Her alibi for the night of the murder was weak,
She claimed to have been home alone watching television with no one to corroborate her story. A search of the Wilson home uncovered a journal hidden in Amanda's bedside table. Entries detailed her growing resentment towards Sarah, lamenting the girl's beauty and the attention she received from Robert. One disturbing passage read, "Sometimes I wish she would just disappear. Our lives would be so much better without her constant presence, her judging eyes." The case against Amanda seemed to strengthen when a neighbor reported seeing her return home in the early hours of the morning on the day Sarah's body was discovered. Amanda had no explanation for this late-night excursion, claiming she must have been sleepwalking, a condition she had never mentioned before. As circumstantial evidence mounted, Carter felt increasing pressure from his superiors and the media to make an arrest. The community, gripped by fear, demanded justice for Sarah. Amanda Wilson, once a sympathetic figure, became the target of public hatred and suspicion. Carter, despite his growing certainty of Amanda's guilt, couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Something about her desperation and fear during interrogations didn't align with the calculated killer he believed had committed this crime. Nevertheless, with the evidence at hand, he prepared to make an arrest. On a rainy Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Sarah's body was found, Amanda Wilson was taken into custody. As she was led from her home in handcuffs, she protested her innocence, her cries echoing through the stunned neighborhood. Robert Wilson watched from the doorway, his face an unreadable mask as his wife was placed in the back of a police cruiser. Little did Carter know that in his pursuit of justice, he had fallen for a brilliantly orchestrated misdirection, leaving the true killer free to cover his tracks. The case against Amanda Wilson seemed airtight, but Detective Michael Carter couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was a small detail, easily overlooked, that finally set him on the path to the truth. While reviewing security footage from businesses near the Wilson home, Carter noticed Robert's car leaving his office parking lot much earlier than he had claimed on the night of the murder. Intrigued by this discrepancy, Carter decided to dig deeper into Robert Wilson's life. He re-interviewed Robert's colleagues and clients, paying closer attention to the man's movements and relationships. It was during a conversation with Robert's assistant that Carter stumbled upon a crucial piece of information. Robert had been making frequent, unexplained trips to a coffee shop across town, always during his lunch break. Surveillance of the coffee shop revealed a startling discovery. Robert was meeting regularly with Elena Gonzalez, his neighbor's wife. The two displayed an intimacy that went far beyond friendly neighborly interactions. Carter had uncovered Robert's secret affair. With this new information, Carter approached Elena for another interview. Confronted with evidence of the affair, Elena broke down, revealing the extent of her relationship with Robert. They had been involved for over a year, stealing moments together whenever they could. Elena, racked with guilt, confessed that Robert had become increasingly paranoid that Sarah might uncover their affair. He had feared that her knowledge could ruin him both personally and professionally. As Carter pieced together the new evidence, the true motive for Sarah's murder began to crystallize. Robert, desperate to protect his secrets and preserve his way of life, had taken drastic measures. Convinced that Sarah had discovered his infidelity, he had lured her into the woods under the pretense of discussing a family matter and murdered her in a fit of rage. The missing camera was the final piece of the puzzle. It was found hidden in Robert's office, containing photos that Sarah had taken of Robert and Elena together. Realizing his mistake, Carter quickly moved to correct it. Amanda Wilson was released, and the focus of the investigation shifted to Robert. On a cold November morning, Robert Wilson was arrested at his office. As he was led away in handcuffs, the community of Millbrook breathed a collective sigh of relief. The true killer was finally brought to justice, and Sarah Thompson's memory was honored with the truth she had sought to uncover. Little did Carter know that his instincts were leading him toward a truth far more sinister than he could have imagined. As the investigation progressed, all signs seemed to point toward Amanda Wilson as the prime suspect in her daughter's murder. Detective Carter, driven by the evidence at hand, began to build a case against the 42-year-old homemaker with a troubled past. Carter's team uncovered a series of heated text exchanges between Amanda and Sarah in the weeks leading up to the murder. In one particularly vicious argument, Amanda accused Sarah of trying to sabotage her marriage, while Sarah fired back, calling her mother a pathetic, jealous old woman.
These digital breadcrumbs seemed to support the theory of a family dynamic that had reached a breaking point. Further fueling suspicion was Amanda's behavior in the aftermath of Sarah's death. While initially distraught, she quickly became defensive and evasive during questioning. Her alibi for the night of the murder was weak. She claimed to have been home alone watching television with no one to corroborate her story. A search of the Wilson home uncovered a journal hidden in Amanda's bedside table. Entries detailed her growing resentment towards Sarah, lamenting the girl's beauty and the attention she received from Robert. One disturbing passage read, "Sometimes I wish she would just disappear. Our lives would be so much better without her constant presence, her judging eyes." The case against Amanda seemed to strengthen when a neighbor reported seeing her return home in the early hours of the morning on the day Sarah's body was discovered. Amanda had no explanation for this late-night excursion, claiming she must have been sleepwalking, a condition she had never mentioned before. As circumstantial evidence mounted, Carter felt increasing pressure from his superiors and the media to make an arrest. The community, gripped by fear, demanded justice for Sarah. Amanda Wilson, once a sympathetic figure, became the target of public hatred and suspicion. Carter, despite his growing certainty of Amanda's guilt, couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Something about her desperation and fear during interrogations didn't align with the calculated killer he believed had committed this crime. Nevertheless, with the evidence at hand, he prepared to make an arrest. On a rainy Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Sarah's body was found, Amanda Wilson was taken into custody. As she was led from her home in handcuffs, she protested her innocence, her cries echoing through the stunned neighborhood. Robert Wilson watched from the doorway, his face an unreadable mask as his wife was placed in the back of a police cruiser. Little did Carter know that in his pursuit of justice, he had fallen for a brilliantly orchestrated misdirection, leaving the true killer free to cover his tracks. The case against Amanda Wilson seemed airtight, but Detective Michael Carter couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was a small detail, easily overlooked, that finally set him on the path to the truth. While reviewing security footage from businesses near the Wilson home, Carter noticed Robert's car leaving his office parking lot much earlier than he had claimed on the night of the murder. Intrigued by this discrepancy, Carter decided to dig deeper into Robert Wilson's life. He re-interviewed Robert's colleagues and clients, paying closer attention to the man's movements and relationships. It was during a conversation with Robert's assistant that Carter stumbled upon a crucial piece of information. Robert had been making frequent, unexplained trips to a coffee shop across town, always during his lunch break. Surveillance of the coffee shop revealed a startling discovery. Robert was meeting regularly with Elena Gonzalez, his neighbor's wife. The two displayed an intimacy that went far beyond friendly neighborly interactions. Carter had uncovered Robert's secret affair. With this new information, Carter approached Elena for another interview. Confronted with evidence of the affair, Elena broke down, revealing the extent of her relationship with Robert. They had been involved for over a year, stealing moments together whenever they could. Elena, racked with guilt, admitted that she had lied in her previous statement to protect Robert. The affair cast Robert's alibi for the night of the murder in a new light. Elena confirmed that they had indeed met that evening, contradicting Robert's claim of working late. This revelation shattered the carefully constructed timeline Robert had provided. As Carter delved further into the relationship between Robert and Elena, he uncovered a web of lies and secret rendezvous. Bank records showed Robert had recently inquired about transferring large sums of money offshore. Email exchanges hinted at plans for a new life together, away from their spouses and responsibilities. The detective now faced a troubling question. Could Robert Wilson, the grieving stepfather, actually be Sarah's killer? The motive was unclear, but the cracks in Robert's perfect facade were beginning to show. Carter realized he had been so focused on Amanda that he had nearly missed the real story unfolding right before his eyes. The pivotal moment in the investigation came from an unexpected source: Sarah's best friend, Emily Chun. She approached Detective Carter with a small leather-bound book, Sarah's personal diary. Emily, racked with guilt, admitted she had initially withheld the diary, fearing it might tarnish Sarah's memory. But as suspicion fell on Amanda, Emily realized the truth was more important than protecting her friend's secrets. Carter spent a sleepless night poring over Sarah's private thoughts. The diary painted a vivid picture of a young woman grappling with a terrible discovery. In entries dating back several months, Sarah wrote of her growing suspicion that her stepfather was having an affair. She described catching glimpses of furtive text messages, overhearing hushed phone calls, and noticing Robert's increasingly erratic behavior. The most damning entry came just 3 days before Sarah's murder. In shaky handwriting, she recounted following Robert one evening and witnessing him in an intimate embrace with Elena Gonzalez. Sarah wrote of her disgust and betrayal, expressing uncertainty about whether to confront Robert or tell her mother. This revelation provided the missing piece of the puzzle. Sarah had discovered Robert's affair, presenting a clear motive for murder. Robert, a man who had built his life on carefully maintaining appearances, faced the threat of losing everything: his marriage, his reputation, and his financial stability. Armed with this new information, Carter revisited the forensic evidence. He ordered a more thorough examination of Sarah's clothing, specifically searching for trace evidence that might have been overlooked. The results were telling. Fibers found on Sarah's jacket matched those from a rare wool blend used in Robert's expensive suits. Furthermore, a re-examination of Sarah's phone records showed a series of calls to Robert's office number on the day of her disappearance. The calls had been brief, suggesting Sarah might have been trying to confront her stepfather or arrange a meeting. Carter also discovered that Robert had purchased a hunting knife from a local sporting goods store just a week before the murder. The knife, conspicuously missing from the Wilson home, matched the type of weapon believed to have been used in the crime. As the pieces fell into place, Carter realized the extent of Robert's deception. He had not only manipulated his family and community, but had also skillfully misdirected the entire investigation towards Amanda. The detective felt a mix of admiration for Robert's cunning and disgust at his cold-blooded actions. With mounting evidence pointing to Robert Wilson as the killer, Carter knew he needed to move quickly. The man who had once been viewed as a pillar of the community was now revealed to be a calculating murderer, willing to sacrifice his stepdaughter to protect his secrets. Detective Carter decided to confront Robert Wilson at his office, away from the prying eyes of neighbors and the media that had been camped outside the Wilson home. As Carter and his partner entered the plush confines of Robert's financial advisory firm, they found him in the middle of a client meeting, the picture of professional composure. In a voice barely above a whisper, Robert began to talk. He spoke of Sarah confronting him in the woods, threatening to expose his affair to Amanda and Elena's husband. He described the panic that overtook him, the fear of losing everything he had worked for. With tears streaming down his face, Robert recounted how he had lashed out in desperation, silencing Sarah permanently. The confession poured out of him, a torrent of guilt and self-loathing. Robert described how he had meticulously planned to frame Amanda, playing on the known tensions between stepmother and stepdaughter. As Carter placed him under arrest, Robert's only words were a broken plea: "Don't tell Elena. Please, don't let her know what I've done." The once proud man was led out of his office in handcuffs, his world collapsing around him as the truth of his actions finally came to light. After a 2-week trial and mere hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, including first-degree murder. The judge, citing the brutal nature of the crime and Robert's calculated attempts to deceive investigators, sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice had been served, but for those whose lives had been shattered by Robert's actions, the wounds would take far longer to heal. In the end, the case of Robert Wilson stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable loss, the relentless pursuit of justice, and the enduring power of a young woman's voice, even when silenced, to ultimately reveal the truth.